Welcome everyone to today's Edison Electric Institute webinar, exploring the applications of digital twin. My name is Alekia Malavarpu and I'm a senior analyst for international programs at EEI. Today we are excited to have with us the CEO of TasNetworks, Dr. Seán McGoldrick, and the Director of Smart Energy at Enzen, Ian McLeod, who will discuss Virtual Tas, the digital twin joint venture between the two companies. They will be joined by Dr. Lawrence Jones, Vice President for International Programs at EEI. As the session progresses, please feel free to ask questions about using the chat feature. Without further ado, I will turn this over to Lawrence to get started.
Thank you, Alekia, and good morning or good evening for those who are in the US, and good afternoon for those closer to Australia. Nice to be here with my friend Ian and Seán to have a conversation about what I think is a fascinating project, the whole idea of trying to create a digital twin of the island of Tasmania. I think when we kick things off here, we're going to ask Seán to tell us about TasNetworks, what it is and what it does, where it's located, and then also hear from Ian as it relates to what Enzen is. Most of you here know what EEI is, Edison Electric Institute, and our members around the world, and obviously TasNetwork being one of our longstanding members. And clearly the idea of this project is one that I have gone back and forth with Ian, discussing it as it has evolved. And we were so delighted when Ian said that the deal was done, that he and Seán had shaken hands and the deal was ready to move forward on doing this Virtual Tas network, so to speak. So we're going to start off with hearing first from Seán, then Ian, and then we'll have a presentation that both Seán and Ian will tag team on. And then we'll open the floor for questions. And please feel free to add your question in the chat box. And more people are coming on, which is great. We'll try to take as many questions as possible. And also, if time allows us, I will break the protocol and allow one live question from the lucky person in the audience, so we'll see how that goes. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Seán. And Seán, you can tell us a little bit about TasNetwork and what you guys do. You're on mute, Seán.
Sorry about that, Lawrence.
There you go, it's okay.
So, and thank you for that kind introduction. So many of you will know that Tasmania is a rather large island, which is a separate state and part of Australia. So it's an island to the south of the eastern part of Australia. We are electrically interconnected into the national electricity market here in Australia. And we are a regulated transmission and distribution business. We have about 1,200 staff and about $3 billion US of assets. And it's been my privilege to be CEO for about a year here. It is a lovely temperate island which has a lot of wind, which we are hoping to exploit as a renewable energy source. We have also quite significant hydro, which has been historically the generation on the island. We are both, TasNetworks is both a regulated business in T&D, but also we have unregulated ventures, including telecoms and data, and now an unregulated venture in the digital world called Virtual Tas, where we are cooperatively working and partnering with Enzen in order to deliver a digital twin for the entire island of Tasmania. It is important for us in that we're making this investment, first of all, as a utility, to have a virtual representation of the entire island, and so that we can do some really good and exciting things in terms of our own business, which we'll talk a little bit about later, not least being a much more resilient utility. But also there are many developments in infrastructure on the island. It's growing as an island, and we're hoping to bring this as a service for all of Tasmanians to really help in the economic development of the island. And we'll speak a little bit more about that in the future or later in the presentation. I'll hand back to you now, Lawrence.
Thanks, Seán. And I think, before we go to Ian, one of the things you said in terms of being a service for the entire island, we definitely want to get back to that. But let me just ask you, Seán, what excited you about this opportunity to execute this project? What was one of the sort of the driving excitement that got you to go down this route before we hear from Ian?
So we are a relatively small utility on a small island with about 500,000 people, but it is developing so fast in terms of renewable energy. And I really like the idea of a digital twin because it's innovative. It allows us to bring bright, smart ideas to how we deal with linear infrastructure development, and also to bring it to our fellow infrastructure developers on the island, but also industry, including forestry, local councils, people who are involved in the water and irrigation industry. There is quite a lot happening on this little island, but none of us had a proper view across all of that infrastructure. We had various cadastral information, we had information in our own disparate systems, but to try and get all of those providers together in one space so that we can avoid interrupting each other's infrastructure, but also assist in each other's development of infrastructure, but also be much more resilient when we get a bushfire coming through or when we get a storm coming through. That was the exciting thing, to have all of that information there and ready, but not just in a static three-dimensional case. We're also doing this on a temporal basis. So it's a 10-year commitment. So that's the really important thing. We're going to be capturing this information over 10 years. Every year, we'll be capturing more and more information. We can see how that infrastructure changes. We can see how the natural environment changes. We can see how our little island here is developing and do so efficiently. That's the thing that excited me.
Well, thanks, Seán, and we'll get back to the business model aspect of this. Certainly a unique project. Ian, congratulations. We've been talking about this project for at least 2 to 3 years now, and it's now about to take place. So you tell us a little bit about Enzen, and then talk a little bit about the fundamentals of digital twin, get into some of the definitions, what it is, what it isn't. We'll hear from Seán in terms of some of the business models. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Yes, look, it is a very exciting project, and I guess there's been a vision there for that federated world of data that's democratised to utilities and communities and governments and business, etc. So I can thank Seán and TasNetworks for agreeing to work together to realise that vision, and I do think it's going to have major impacts for the utility and for the state, and hopefully grow from there into other geographies. In terms of Enzen, we're a global provider of consulting, technology, engineering and innovation services, and we focus predominantly or purely on energy and water, but I would also wrap the environment around that. So contextually, we are concerned about the environment, obviously, and we want to do our bit there. And digital twins, being able to see and visualise and understand and inflate data, enables you to get that insight to be able to take actions that make real differences. So that's what we're about. We're about partnering too, about bringing together capability that each individual party by itself can't use in the market or extract value from. It's the complementary capabilities that enable the value to be created. So that's a bit about Enzen. So I'll move through the presentation. Okay, so the first thing though we need to cover off, Lawrence, is what is a spatial digital twin? And I was fortunate enough to go and visit GE a number of years ago to look at their digital twinning of jet engines that they're doing across the world and tracing those things. So in terms of context, I've put a couple of definitions up here. So the Australian and New Zealand Spatial Information Council say a digital twin is a dynamic representation of a real-world object or system. Wikipedia, which I guess everyone refers to, says a digital twin is a real-time virtual representation of a real-world physical system or process, but then it goes on to say that serves an indistinguishable digital counterpart of it for practical purposes such as system simulation, integration, testing, monitoring and maintenance. So that's taking the next step in terms of, okay, I've got a digital twin, but what value is it actually delivering? What can I do with it? And I wanted to go to our focus. So in this context, we're talking about wide area digital twins, and in the context of the discussion today, it's all of a state, full state. So our focus is wide area digital twins, a utility or state that provide broader contextual intelligence, and Seán covered it well, provides broader contextual intelligence, analytics, simulation capability on how the built, that's the buildings, the natural environment, systems, economic and social worlds interact together. So I sort of call it the mother twin, because we're putting digital twins within the digital twins itself. You could have a digital twin of a substation or a pole and contextually put it into the statewide digital twin. So it provides significantly more intelligence. That image there is an image of a town on the seaside. The red dots represent hot water units, which in this case, we're on time clocks. The green is solar. So how do I match hot water load for storage of energy to solar? Those sorts of questions can be answered. In terms of the capability, capabilities aligned to the Spatial Information Council's Digital Twin Maturity Model, and that's the outer circle there. So it's about locating where things are accurately. People sort of know where things are, but often it's not accurate. We generally find most assets on average across a utility are something like 30 metres out in the real world. Visualising it, seeing where it is, integrating, so bringing enterprise data in, you're bringing your pole information data, your energy data, your customer data, those sorts of things into the digital twin, energising it through things like IoT and your SCADA, etc., so I can start to touch things and make it live. Actuates about controlling. So street lights are a good example. So smart street lighting, controlling those hot water units. So DER and distributed energy resource, and DERMS in terms of distributed energy resource management systems starts to give you that control. But to have control, you need to be able to see and understand, and this gives that in totality. And then to automate, there are processes there. Once you understand what you've got, you automate them to make them more efficient. But I want to emphasise one of the key issues is we can give people a whole lot of data, but unless they're willing to transform their business, they'll never get the full value from it. So the inner circle talks about strategy, where we're going in this space, advisory, analytics, what's the data telling us? How we transform the business, what sort of things do we need to do, what sort of contracts do we need to change, what organisational changes need to happen, what process improvements are required. And then benefits realisation, so making sure that when you sign off on a benefit, you actually achieve that. So that's critical. The challenges, leadership and inertia. So there's a lot of inertia in the power industry, and there's a lot of inertia in government. So to be able to cut through that requires strong leadership. And that's what we've seen in Tassie, both at a government level and a utility level. We've had strong leadership there that's helped get this through. Because people do bits and pieces of digital twins, they do it project-based, they have different standards, etc., etc. It's not economic, it's not efficient, and this is flipping that whole model over. So in terms of applications, we create the value by joining the dots. So joining the utility to its consumers and community, joining the physical world to the virtual world and the connected world. And as I said, the business world also in terms of transformation. Joining the dots between decentralisation. I'd like to say that Australia has the highest penetration of distributed renewables in the world. Some of our states are now between 30 to 40% rooftop solar generation. And the distribution systems are quite dumb, they're quite visible. And what we've got to do is make them, we've got to make them visible, and we've got to be able to see what's happening there and automate and control. So decentralisation, decarbonisation, all same with the same thing. How can I host more on my network? Now, how hot can I run that feeder? What is the clearance to ground, etc.? How much energy is going through it? And by digitising all those processes, I can start to analyse and manage. The nexus between energy and water is important, particularly in Tassie, where they want to be the battery of the nation. They've got a lot of hydro resource, and water as a battery or water as demand management is a key element. There's a lot of energy use, filtering water, pumping water, shifting water, etc. So it brings that together. And the natural and built world. So, interesting process in here. We engaged a lot with forestry, and in Australia, carbon sequestration is part of the response to carbon change, and measuring that through a digital twin is important. In terms of smart partnership, as I said, it's about bringing elements together. The network is a linear infrastructure, as Seán says. It interacts with the environment. It interacts with its customers geographically. We always talk about the science of where, but we're not running factories, and we're running a linear infrastructure that's out there. It's across the whole state. It's interacting with the environment. It's interacting with other infrastructure. And by bringing that together with some capability, so the data capture, the digital twin analytics, the IoT platforms, the IoT networks, and applying that across the utility and to the market itself and the community, you get things like smart cities, smart industry, logistics, agriculture. There's a lot of things that can be done, and all that makes sense to improve customer service and improve business performance. So that's a bit of an overview, Lawrence, of the digital twin and its applications, particularly from our perspective, where it is and what we're doing. And I'll hand over to yourself, Seán, now to go through Virtual Tas.
Thanks, Ian. Seán, over to you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And there you can see our flying our colors there, Virtual Tas. But what is it really about? It's digital transformation is about supporting innovation and putting Tasmanian citizens at, as we say, at the heart of everything we do. That's the Tasmanian state government's view of the world. And the vision is, our vision is a prosperous and connected Tasmania collaborating and thriving in a technology-enabled world. It's about really bringing it all together for a range of different providers. Now, as you can see, our goals here are to have this digital twin be federated, democratized. It's to be the whole of the state. Various bits and pieces, including in my own organization, we've done a little bit of LiDAR. We had covered most of our assets, but this is a far more ambitious program to cover the entire island. And there I say it, lots of the little islands that are off the island as well. And it's to make sure that it is truly all of state. It's four-dimensional, as I mentioned, including a temporal view of the world. This is critical for us. We need to see how our island, our network, and other people's networks, how the vegetation, how the forestry is developing over time. It's to be a full engineering grade, including all of the key information we need to do our jobs. It's going to be web-based, scalable, and it's going to be annually captured, as I mentioned. So it's a big endeavor, and it's going to be very worthwhile for us as a state. If we look at how, from a utility point of view, what the advantages or what the applications might be and potential benefits, you can see that we're aiming for benefits in terms of improved performance, in terms of increased revenue, and in terms of reducing our costs. So the traditional stuff that we would more usefully or more usually do, including vegetation management, is fully part of this. Asset management is fully part of this. And we will save money as a utility and be more efficient as a result and far more capable. Disaster management and so on. But there's also about, an element of increasing revenue here through things like STIPUS, which is a performance incentive payment that we get paid by the regulator for good performance. But there's a range of different other revenue generating elements that will help us as an overall business. And improved performance is really at the very heart of this. It's about increasing resilience, reducing risk, improving reliability, improved safety and service for our customers. So those are the key things. That's the very rich target area that we're going on and are going at, and it's great to be involved in it. So we have also market applications beyond us as a mere utility. So everything from federal government, state and local governments, utilities, private businesses, forestry, we aim to be able to geotag every single tree in Tasmania, and there's millions of trees. We can associate with each tree its particular species, its growth rates, where it is in terms of the wider geographical area. But there's tremendous interest in things like that from academia, but also the insurance industries. And so there's a big market pull here. Everybody from our irrigation colleagues through to our fellow gas utility, but academia in the University of Tasmania. And also we see that we can deal with timber companies such as Sustainable Timber Tasmania, Hydro Tasmania, and also the Farmers Association and in different insurance companies. These are all tremendously interested in this, and it's a product that they have not got at the moment. One that's particularly close to Enzen and TasNetworks' hearts is the cultural, social, and wider economic benefits we can bring. So one clear example of that is in Tasmania here, we've a quite unfortunate history colonially, and we've nearly lost the entire heritage of the Aboriginal people, the Palawa here in Tasmania. And we're attempting to help them recover that, because we can scan the island, we can come across sites because we're down to the millimeter level. So our overflights will be able to identify tracks, traditional migration routes, traditional artifacts and sites that are largely unknown to the Palawa. So we're going to be working with them and their representatives to deliver something for them that will be lasting and meaningful. It's also meaningful for infrastructure providers, because at the moment what's happening is we're coming across these sites when infrastructure, be it irrigation or power lines, come across these when we're building, which is immediately into a conflict situation. By avoiding that conflict, by knowing where these are, by intelligent routing, by having that data and information, it's going to be so beneficial. We're also very determined to exploit the neurodiversity among the wider Australian community, so that we can use their exceptional cognitive abilities to help process the information. And as Ian will talk in a little moment, we're also very attuned into greater economic and social resilience around being disaster smart. We are vulnerable as an island, as is a lot of Australia, to bushfire, but also flooding. And it's important that we understand the implications on infrastructure, so that we don't wake up and find that a bushfire not only affects our electricity supply, but the lack of our electricity supply because of a bushfire impacts then on firefighting capabilities and so on. So it's about bringing all of these together in a virtual world that will allow us to model and get on with being smart when we're planning. So ultimately, last bit for me, this is about paving the path to a more resilient, prosperous, and sustainable future for all of Tasmania. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, I think you're going to talk a little bit about smart Tasmania communities, and before we get into the Q&A.
Yep. All right, so thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Seán. Seán's provided great context there, and what we wanted to do is look at one of the applications of Virtual Tas digital twin, and this is one of those such applications. And we know this is important for the US. It's important for the world. We're seeing disasters, the frequency of disasters increasing, the fires in California, the fires in Australia, the cyclones in Australia and across the Pacific, and hurricanes down in the Gulf region, all having a big impact on communities. And so it's important to us, it's important to TasNetworks, and we've been successful in securing funding from the federal government to do a project that sits over the top of Virtual Tas. So the why? So people may remember the Australian Black Summer of bushfires. It was just before COVID. It was something that shifted the agenda in Australia. I've been involved in disasters over a number of years and passionate in this space. I used to run Ergon Energy, and we get hit by cyclones, Yassi being the largest. It cost Ergon $104 million. But it costs the community significantly more. So that's where the passion comes from. So what about Australian Black Summer bushfires? 55,000 square miles. I had to go and check that out. And it's the size of Iowa, basically. It's the largest fire that Australia has seen. 34 lives lost, and 1 million animals perished. There was photos of koalas and kangaroos that were impacted, displaced, killed, etc. So it had a big impact not only on people's lives but the fauna in Australia. 3,000 buildings lost, increased Australia's CO2 by 80%. So we all collectively work on getting our emissions down, and these events contributed 80% more to our annual ledger on carbon, and the cost was $4.4 billion. Climate change, predictions for Tassie are for a hotter and drier climate with longer fire seasons. So I commend TasNetworks for having the foresight and vision to get ahead of the game. I think we're not always ahead of the game, and this is certainly doing that. So the risk is increasing. We need to respond now to that increasing risk, and this project does that. And community and economic resiliency. I deliberately put two photos in there to stress a point. When you have a digital twin and you overlay consequence and risk, etc., you might see that the asset there is probably not the appropriate asset for the future. Here you can see two very expensive assets that have been burnt down, and the bit that's been burnt down is a pole. And they are replacing those assets with the same asset. So management won't know that. It will be all part of the process. But imagine just going through your whole asset. In TasNetworks' case, 270,000 poles, and understanding what the future should look like for each one of those poles to make it more resilient. The double dividend of resilience, and this was done by Deloitte's Economics some time ago, which projected Australia's cost of disasters would significantly increase over the next 30 years. And it's a big number. I think it was $70-odd billion per annum by 2050 from memory. But the thing I want to emphasise here is, we can talk about the investment into risk and will the consequence occur and what was the probability of this. But what we're talking about is investment into the community, and some of those investments, whether it's IoT or digital twin, as Seán has indicated, pays a significant dividend in itself. In fact, there's commercial returns in doing that on its own without bringing in the impact of mitigating the impact of disasters or even avoiding them. So there's a double dividend of resilience there. So I need to point that out. So what is Disaster Smart Tasmania Communities? It's basically taking the data from Virtual Tas over 3 years. So there will be a temporal view on what's happening. We're working with councils, linear infrastructure providers, utilities, etc., to look at that data and understand risk better than we've ever understood it before, to provide a single view across all those entities which they've never had before, to understand the systems of systems. So I can look at water and sewerage, and as I know with cyclones, they're one of the first to go. Telcos go very quickly. And in Ergon, we spent many hours putting generation onto those sort of installation, finding councils and others had not planned to lose power. So the systems are systems, okay? I've got water infrastructure, sewage infrastructure, comms infrastructure, dependencies on energy infrastructure, etc., being able to visualise that and see that. It's also including IoT. So we'll be sitting with councils and infrastructure providers in February with the first data set, first digital twin, going through, okay, where is the risk? We're going to be putting sensors that will sense smoke, wind, ground moisture, temperature, humidity, water levels, and even down to sensing the resources that go out to fires. There was an instance, we've had instances in Australia where water trucks have ran out of water in the middle of a fire and people have perished because they couldn't see how much water they had left and got themselves in situations they couldn't get out of. Our first year focus is on infrastructure and then moving into community and business. And what I mean by that is we'll be working with the community and businesses on their own disaster resilience plans. And when I say working with them, we'll be providing advice, but the most important thing is we'll be providing intelligence and information. So Lawrence, that's a view of these after TasNetworks. The second project we're working on, which is a priority to us all, which is making the Tasmanian communities more resilient to these events.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Seán. I think we should just go ahead and start the conversation. And I think my first question is going to be for both of you, but it has to do with partnerships. So one of the things you talk about, Seán, was sort of building these partnerships. Can you all talk about the challenge? Obviously, it was easy to get Enzen and TasNetworks to agree to move forward in this project. But talk about the whole journey of getting the entire island of Tasmania on board. What were some of the challenges and what are some of the lessons learned for other organizations listening who might want to embark on creating their own digital twin for their communities?
So I'll have a crack at that, Lawrence. I'd say, first of all, the biggest challenge was actually within the utility. So I have many gifted engineers who love to innovate with new technology, but they had lots of different pilot programs, many of which were in this territory, but none of them had the right strategy, vision, or scale to progress. So part of the task that I had to do, first of all, was to bring these people together and go, look, we need a game changer here. We need something that's going to be very different, get to the same goal, but far quicker and more comprehensively. So we literally had to shut down some pilot programs, shut down some areas of investigation, and then put our eggs into this basket. And as you can imagine, that, was not without controversy. So we have, first and foremost, we decided we'd set up through our digital and data company, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of TasNetworks, that we would set up a joint venture with Enzen, and that the overall goal would be a full digital twin, not just a pilot project, not just LiDAR of our individual assets, not just some, wonderful new piece of software, that we were going to go comprehensively for all of the island, but that we would have TasNetworks as a foundation customer, putting all of its eggs in this basket, getting it going for 10 years. And with that foundation customer, the conversation with other parts of the island, other businesses, government, and so on the island was much easier because they could see that TasNetworks was committed for 10 years. And then it became just almost a microcosm of the self-same thing. Various different businesses had also innovative programs, but they were too small, too many pilot projects. It was convincing them, which Ian is marvelous at doing, convincing them that they should join with us and use our data and be part of that, rather than having an independent republic of, forestry or an independent republic of state government, that everybody would come along here and we'd all get the prize at the end of the day. Ian, I'm sure you have some comments on that.
Yeah, so it was important to make sure there was a pull from industry and government and others in Tasmania. So the first thing we did was actually come up with a quite extensive stakeholder management plan and identify all the key stakeholders across Tasmania. And we spent the first 2 to 3 months doing that, all the way from federal government to state government to all the different industries, forestry, water, electricity, etc. And the thing with digital twins today, in Ergon, we did one back in 2011-12. There was a whole network and was done every year, but it was only the network. The vision was always there was value much greater than that. And in this case, we wanted to put forward something that would achieve that vision, and we saw Tassie as the opportunity to do that. One thing that Seán covered up front was the vision of the Tasmanian government, and we looked at that and we thought, that's great, it's setting a framework. The government wants to go in this direction. We spent quite a bit of time looking for the budget to support it, only to find there wasn't one. And you could treat that two ways. I could say, okay, well, that's potentially the end of that, but we treated it quite differently. We said that created an opportunity to have a conversation with government, because what they were really trying to do is provide an environment and a framework for business to come along and meet their vision. And that's what we thought we could do. So we sold the story to the stakeholders. It was an amazing process as they sat, I enjoy talking to different industries, because they just automatically come out and say, we could do this and we could do that, things that you'd never thought of. So it was huge amount of support across Tasmania. We knew most of the benefits was within TasNetworks itself. So it gets back to the leadership there. If we could get the foundation business case right, look at the opportunities for the future, then this had a chance to fly. And that's what was done. It is a project to provide better services for the state. And the state owning TasNetworks and having the strong business case had the opportunity to make that happen. And that was recognised by Seán's team. I'd like to say Seán immediately put one of his, when we presented the option back in September of last year to Seán's executive, where we'd done all the work, we'd done the business cases, we'd done the stakeholder engagement, and Seán, we'd engaged with 4224, the unregulated business, and more than engaged, we agreed, let's partner to do this together, because it made sense. The local presence, the connections, all those sorts of things. When we presented in September, Seán put a leader on, Ross Burridge, who sponsored it through that process and made it happen and helped us move forward. So that's the environment that was created. That's the work that was done to build the passion, to build the pull, and to create the leadership drive to make it happen.
So I want to move now into, in the slide, you talk about it being a 10-year process or 10-year project, so to speak, in terms of the value being accrued and delivered. Let's talk about the market applications, because I think what many people seem to be curious about is, how is this thing going to be monetized? right? So you have these services you're going to offer to the community, the fire service, the universities. Talk a little bit about the business model behind digital twin, because I think in many countries around the world, as they look at resilience, the question is, how do you pay for resilience? Now, could a digital twin with market applications be one basis where you can monetize the applications that have been delivered by the twin to enable resilience? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see that going forward?
Yeah, so there's a bit of economics in this, and there's a bit of IP as well. So to be able to capture the full island at an engineering grade, so we're not talking terrain-based models, we're talking engineering grade. So you can see the infrastructure, you can measure the infrastructure, you can automate it. That was critical. Now, to be able to do that at scale, so the scope had to be the whole island, do it at scale using some IPs and methodologies, etc., to pick that together to drive the lowest cost solution. Now, when we looked at benchmarking the cost of these programs around the world, and a benchmarking paper was done, TasNetworks have to prove that it's better than what they could otherwise get in the market. We were able to do that. And so there was a reliance on some IP there to be able to do that. It's a different business model as well. The commoditization of data required the platform to be web-based. It requires it to be agile. It requires you to be able to build capability quickly. And that's the good thing about the digital world. You can create digital sprints. Someone's got an application, it's over an open community platform that people can develop applications for forestry, for agriculture, for councils, etc. Just need to understand the problem to be solved. And there are a lot of smart people out there who can then take all that massive amount of data and solve those problems. So, you know, things like, let me give an example, shade in cities. I'd have to say Tassie's Hobart could probably do with a few more trees around the suburbs. Not that it's overly hot environment, but it does get hot sometimes in summer. But that amenity, the environment, the offsets, etc. Let's do an application that identifies how many trees are in the city, where they are, what are the heat areas, etc. So it wasn't a hard process to sell to the stakeholders. In fact, I was quite amazed at the way they got the concept, the story, and the way they picked it up and talked about the applications. Like the insurance industry was, okay, well, they actually said to us, you know, can we have the rights from an insurance agency, exclusive rights to do this? We want to potentially put geofences around our insured assets, our houses, our buildings, and those sorts of things. Geez, you're monitoring it every year so we can update that. It's not a single look at the risk. We know what the risk is and we can communicate with the customers. That sounds really good. So I think, Lawrence, to sum up, people understood what it was about when we put it to them. We had the story ready, we put it to them, we put the model to them. It is economic the way it's being done. So I think James Bengay, our tech lead, who's the architect of all this, fascinating guy, put it reasonably well in a recent video, that we're providing access to companies and businesses and utilities to data and intelligence that they otherwise could never afford. And in this model, they can.
Interesting. There's a question from Frank Mayo, and I think it's a very interesting one, given that you mentioned insurance company, because Frank's question is about how you model time, in the sense that basically visualizing things that have happened before, things that are happening now, and things that are going to happen in the future. So sort of a predictive capability is being added to the twin, where the twin can evolve. Now, I must tell you, as a person who has twin boys, I'm trying to understand what this digital twin is going to teach me about how do you deal with twin boys when you start to project how they're going to behave in the future, right? So talk a little bit about, based on Frank's question, does the twin have the ability to look back in time and also look forward from a predictive capability standpoint. I see the forecast. I know there's going to be storm coming. I know there's potential for bushfires. How can I use that forward-looking information and better prepare my city for what might come? So adding some predictive capability to the twin, is that something you can comment on, either of you?
Yeah, I'll go first. So yes, absolutely. It was very important to us that it was temporal. So it was very important from an application perspective, particularly around the environment, that it's done every year and it's done economically. So things like vegetation management is obviously a clear application there. The thing for a utility is the utility is going to see all this information very quickly in a window of time. And from a true risk management perspective, they can manage better. But going back to time, historical data sets on where the fires have occurred in Tasmania and what the consequence of those fires can be brought into the data set. We will be bringing in real estate information to talk about the real estate value of property around there. So we can look at future consequential risks, not just a period in time. There's an IoT overlay to bring in real-time data on risk itself. So the conflation of data into a single pane of glass and an analytical engine can allow you to do predictive analytics. So vegetation growth rates will be part of that, even though we're going to do annual captures. So we'll know exactly where the clearance issues are between wires and ground, wires to building, wires to vegetation. We'll also be seeing what's happening with the consequences of changes. So TasNetworks will be able to say every tree is different, every pole is different, it has a different profile. But in terms of growth projections, you know, what is the species of the tree? You know, how much rain has there been? How dry it is? What's a fall in risk? I know fall in risk was a big cause of the California fires. So using this very rich data to look forward, but also bringing in the historical data to look back. I think, yeah, certainly, you know, part of Virtual Tas was creating, I'll just say this from a joint venture perspective. A lot of people say joint ventures are hard and usually they are a customer service provider relationship in the utility industry. That's my experience. In this, we're building a 10-year asset that's owned by TasNetworks and Enzen. It'll be one of the richest data sets in the world for a state. Be able to do predictive analytics, be able to look at history, and to be able to improve overall economics and resiliency of Tassie. So that rich data set will enable that to happen, and that will become a significant asset that both joint venture parties will curate and look after and treat like your twin boys.
And Lawrence, if I just might add, sure. I mean, this digital twin is, if I could say, sensor neutral. We have lots of different, so yeah, we'll be flying the island and we'll be gathering LiDAR information, but I have inspectors out in the field. Other businesses have different methods of gathering data. We'll get all of this data as and when it arrives and populate it into our digital twin. And you know, there are forestry businesses have their way of maintaining their assets and monitoring growth patterns and knowing what's happening out there. Similarly, irrigation businesses, they have a different approach. Councils have different layers of cadastral information, both old and new and developing. So all of this we will be integrating together. So it's an ever rich and it's not just a snapshot once a year for 10 years. As different things emerge, as my asset managers go out there with their pole top cameras and find something, they'll be able to provide that information to our joint venture so that we can then go to the individual pole and update the information. So it's a very, very deep and rich set that will be constantly updating. And it'll allow us, we'll be able to do snapshots back and forth, as we saw, and a lot of predictive work particularly in modeling bushfires and storms.
So
I think one more point, Lawrence, before we get off that. The rapid increase of renewables in Australia. I remember talking to a New South Wales distributor, and we talked about this issue, and I said it's going to be an issue. You need to know more about your asset. They said, no, it's not an issue. We're only at 12%. They're now heading up towards 30%, and they put a video out the other day on the challenges that causes. So when you look at predictive analytics and whether the network can handle these things, so one of the things TasNetworks asks for is the operating capacity of every feeder based on engineering design and clearances against the ground. That's going to tell you how hot you can run those feeders, how much hosting you can put on it. That's an extremely dynamic environment in Australia, and it's moving very quickly. So this model will help, again, look forward and look back.
So Seán, listening to both you and Ian, one thing that comes to mind where the industry is today is the issue of human resource, right? So you're literally creating a platform or a system that is going to require a very diverse set of skills coming together, right? So Ian talked about predictive capabilities. You're not talking about traditional power systems engineer or even traditional data engineers. You're talking about people who are in sort of a very varied set of academic skills, if you may. And I know there are some university professors on this link here today. Talk about the challenge you see in front of you guys as you embark upon this. Both you first, Seán, both you and Ian, but you first, Seán. How do you manage the human resource aspect of implementing such a very data-rich but model complex digital twin?
Oh, look, in its forefront of our mind inside TasNetworks, I have no doubt that in years to come, I will be employing teenagers who are used to the virtual gaming world, and I will have big darkened rooms where they'll be wandering around with headsets, navigating through a three-dimensional model of my assets and pointing out various different things that my engineers can then analyze and my field staff can then, and their contractors, cure in terms of faults. So we're fully committed to this. And even so much so that our people and culture department have developed a resourcing strategy in terms of capability. What does TasNetworks, the business of the future, by 2030 need in terms of skill sets? So we're always going to need those great engineering skills that will be able to look at issues and go, that's a problem, this is how we fix it. But getting the information into their hands, those good experienced engineers, there will be a whole different type of individual who will be taking the data, manipulating the models, and giving it as information into the right hands to make good decisions. So that we are fully committed as a business. We understand that in years to come, we'll be less about poles and wires and assets per se, and more about how we manipulate data and information. As businesses, utilities have always had enormous resources of data and information, but we never treated it with value or respect. It was in hard to find folders and documents. It was in spreadsheets sitting on somebody's desk and not even on a centralized information platform. So we're moving rapidly away from that now, but we need people who are attuned to, in terms of data scientists, people who are comfortable with the virtual world, who will provide all of that data turn it, transmogrify it into information to give to good professionals who can make smart decisions on the basis of that. That's what the game of the future.
So Ian, based on what Seán said, and I'm coming back to my twin boys who will now not have to physically travel to Tasmania, they can sort of get the virtual Tasmania and experience the same thing there. But aren't you still going to need folks who have basic understanding of power systems engineering? Because when you give me that virtual world, I have to sort of put on my goggle, whatever it is, go into Tasmania, go into a substation, do something there in the metaverse, so to speak, but I have to know what I'm doing. So how do you develop both the digital acumen as well as the power systems acumen to run TasNet in the next 10, 15 years?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest value in this whole deal is the partnership. So in Enzen, we have people, again, I'll refer to James Bengay, Matt Coleman, those sorts of guys who are ex-utility people, so they understand how utilities run, but they're also leaders in terms of their thought leadership around digital models and being able to create those and be able to deal with big data, huge amount of data quickly and process that. So, but I want to get back to the key point here. The reason I'm so excited about this deal is because, as I said at the start, you bring together complementary capabilities, and TasNetworks, as you say, these skills are always needed. We are starting on this digital twin as a physical digital twin. The vision is it will be an energy digital twin as well, and a water digital twin, etc., in the future to be able to leverage all that. We don't want to bring all the skills in Enzen to do that. We want to understand it, but we need partners to work with who understand their networks, their problems to be solved, and collectively we sit down and look at that and say, hey, here's how we think we can do that, and that's important. So we're not looking to do that inside our business and be the expert. We're just looking to partner and bring the capabilities together. And you're pointing out that system design, talking to Engineers Australia the other day, and talking about, you know, their advocacy in the industry, and they got very focused on batteries. And I said, look, surely as an engineering association, you should be advocating the importance of system and diversity. That system design element is absolutely critical here in Australia at the moment. And I know utilities are having battles getting good qualified people in that space because there's been a bit of a gap. But yeah, we'll partner with TasNetworks. Seán will get those wonderful people, and he's already got wonderful people in there, and we'll bring our skills and together be able to solve those sorts of problems.
Let me read a question here from Andre in the audience here. So, and I want to read the question to follow up on the last audience question about time and go looking forward, looking backwards. Basically, Andre's point here is that simulation is very powerful, the ability to simulate potential changes in climate, population growth, and he goes on. And he says, if it's gamified, it's a great way to get stakeholders to engage in a sort of a meaningful way. So any thought on gaming or gamifying this whole process where you create games within the digital twin that people can learn about it? And also the point he makes about UVA, I guess, big game, and I guess UVA is University of Virginia, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, Chesapeake Bay, somewhere in the US here, where you have these kinds of things happening, and you talk about partnerships. So two things here. One, you know, coming back to gamifying this whole platform where you can play games, if you may, with the twin. And then two, extending your notion of partnership, Seán, beyond Australia. Where do you think about international collaboration? For example, in California, you have a lot of companies who will be in the same situation like you, or in other parts of the US. So maybe, Ian, you can take the gaming question, and Seán can take the partnership question, and see how we kind of try to wrap this up.
Yeah. Well, I'll have a go at the partnership first. So let me just say that we have great ambitions for this joint venture. We don't see it as purely and only a TAS-centric effort. I fully expect that we will have a wonderful demonstration site here in Tasmania that we can use then in many different parts of the world. I think it will be a great example of what the future brings in infrastructure, and how we can best use that wonderful ability we now have to efficiently collect and process data into that infrastructure world. And we'll prove it on a statewide basis. So that, I think, will, you know, that's the major thing. We're going to be a wonderful demonstration site, but then the sky's the limit beyond that, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Ian, you get the last word. Thoughts on gamifying the whole digital twin. And I can tell you from a gaming of twins, I have twins and I know what it is to have two twins play together. So how do we gamify the framework to really make use of the applications for policymakers and others?
It sounds like the first thing I should do is engage you as a consultant. Look, in terms of gamification, we haven't looked at that specifically. We did some time ago in a different life create, and it was in Ergon. I got Google to agree to send one of our employees, pay to send one of our employees to Google Mountain to spend a week with Google. And then we use that prize as an incentive for our people to come up with use cases. And there were 90-something use cases that came through. And the person who won created one around outage visualization and connectivity to the customers so they could see that visualization. So, you know, we harvest those ideas and took the top, I think 10 of those and started to integrate them into the business. So that's sort of a gamification approach. But back to Virtual Tas, we are talking about potentially putting an innovation model over the top. We're going to have the richest data, one of the richest data sets of a state in the world. We're focused on energy and water. We want others to come in across agriculture, forestry, local government, etc. And here is data. When you can bring data to people and experts, SMEs, and they can jump in there and use it and create applications, that's important. We'll probably put a commercial model over the top where we give access to the data. We'll support those people and participate in the commercialisation of the actual applications themselves. So we want to give an incentive and also support each other along the ride. So I think that's important. We very much see engaging people's minds with this as critical. And I'll just finish by saying, one thing I once said to our people is, who uses our enterprise systems? I won't say what they are, the enterprise systems. And I spoke to thousands of people and I only found a few that were actually using them. Usually you have administrators over the top. Why don't you use it? Because they're hard. Who uses the internet? Everybody does. Who got trained in the internet? I found one person across the organisation who got trained in it. Why? Because it's simple, easy, and a single pane of glass to get to all the resources I need to manage my life. Like Lawrence, I'd like to say to you, you could do a bit more on the internet to explore the twin issues with the kids and how to bring them up. That resource is available for you. But from a utility perspective, imagine if you got access to all the information through a single pane of glass for simply navigating a model.
Well, listen, Ian and Seán, I must say you guys have embarked on something that is going to be transformational for our industry. My last question to you, Seán, will be, what are you really excited about as a result of this project? Ian talked about his excitement, but from your perspective as a utility executive, what excites you the most about how this could potentially transform our industry in terms of how we manage resilience and how we deal with some of the issues around, extreme weather?
So for me, the first thing that I'm really so happy about is I have seen so many energized people around TasNetworks and indeed in other companies on the island, hugely excited about this new venture, because now they can see all of us have hopes and dreams about stuff we'd love to do. Now they can actually see it becoming a reality. And I've had, countless people come to me and go, this is wonderful, I can do this. This is wonderful, I can do that. So it's really caught fire in terms of people's imagination. And as Ian said earlier, the use cases that they're coming up with are just endless. And so I think it's filling a gap that has obviously existed for some time. So I'm very, very excited about that. I'm also very excited, perhaps more selfishly, from our own business point of view, because it will definitely facilitate in terms of our efficiency journey, in terms of our cost saving journey, and indeed our innovative capability, we'll be a different company as a result of this. We'll be viewed differently, not least in Tasmania, but also in a broader Australian sense. So I think that's marvelous. Those are the two things that excite me most along it.
Well, thank you so much, Seán and Ian. I think congratulations is also due you guys for taking on this huge endeavor. We're certainly going to be monitoring it very closely from different parts of the world. To those who've been listening, the presentation will be made available to you as well as the video if you can want to share with others. And I should also say that next week there's going to be an influential minds conversation with an author on Power Law is the name of the book, talking about the role of venture capital in our industry. And perhaps venture capital could be coming to invest in some digital twins in different parts of the world. Our next member public-facing webinar is going to be with Vector in New Zealand, and they'll be talking about the work they're doing on EV infrastructure and EV deployment in New Zealand. So with that, I said thank you all for joining us. Ian and Seán, thanks again for doing this. And Alicia, thank you. And have a good weekend, you guys, and have a good evening, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to
Bye.
see you.